Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do. In this episode, I interviewed Ted Theodoropoulos, CEO of InfoDash and 2024 ILTA Innovative Leader of the Year, whose practice of dedicated thinking time and unwavering commitment to customer success has shaped his approach to building solutions that legal professionals actually love to use. Welcome to the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. I'm Tom Martin, your host. I'm really thrilled today to have on the CEO of InfoDash, Ted Theodoropoulos. Got that right.
You did.
He is a very accomplished and really varied in his expertise and experience, and I'm really looking forward to talking with him today. He received the 2024 ILTA Innovative Leader of the Year award. His company, InfoDash, has just been recognized as a rising star in the Cloud 100 put out by Forbes. He also, and this is really cool, and I hope we get into it a little bit, has done like an expedition through the Atacama Desert in Chile, as well as learning on the ground in Slovakia and Eastern Europe about business styles and approaches of Eastern European businesses. And then lastly, he also learned on location in Hong Kong and Macau about foreign trade issues. So he is like the James Bond of legal innovation. And I'm looking forward to speaking with you, Ted. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I really appreciate you having me.
Yeah, for sure. It's a pleasure. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and what InfoDash is.
Sure. So InfoDash is an intranet, extranet platform for large law firms. We started our journey as a company called AcroWire back in 2008, and we were a consulting organization. So we did time and materials, IT work, mostly application development, and we built bespoke intranets and extranets. It just kind of fell. I used to work at Microsoft, which I'm sure we'll get into a little later. Started moonlighting on the side gig, started making more than the day job, jumped out and started this consulting business. We knew we wanted to focus on legal services, which I'm happy to talk about why a little later. And it just, gravity kind of pulled us in the direction of intranets and extranets. Law firms have a high degree of need for collaboration, and both internally and externally with their clients. So we went down the bespoke route in the beginning, where we were building these solutions bespoke. Then we partnered with a company called Handshake in the mid-2010s. We became their implementation partner, and then we parted ways with them in 2017-ish, 2018, and decided to jump out and build our own solution, which we did. And then we rebranded and relaunched the company as InfoDash in January of 2022. So about 3.5 years. That's the 40,000-foot overview.
Okay, so if we go back to AcroWire, then you've been a part of the company since 2010. You've been running
2008.
2008. Wow.
Yeah.
And as we'll learn, you've started very early on in terms of running your own company. By the way, there's a bit of a connection personally for the idea of intranets, because actually one of my first jobs was working at the Screen Actors Guild, running their residuals department. And one of the things I did, this was back in 1999, 2000, was implement an intranet at SAG, because as I'm sure you do with your clients, there's a lot of like institutional knowledge that can get lost. And there's a lot of turnover there. And so like putting the knowledge, the information into an intranet was a really fantastic way of passing it on.
Yeah, I mean, intranets are a key remit for knowledge management and innovation professionals. It's historically, they've like kind of not been very sexy, if you will. They started off in the early days. So legal intranets have been around since early 2000s for the most part. And they started off fairly static. What's on the lunch menu? How do I find a PTO policy, those sorts of things. And over time, they've grown into incredibly complex, dynamic information platforms, essentially, where, there's integrations with all the back office systems like practice management, document management, CRM, HRIS, experience management, and then surfacing that in a kind of a single pane of glass. So they become very sophisticated, like a client page, for example. You can have engagement letters from the DMS. You can have a list of open matters from practice management. You can have a list of all the attorneys who billed time to that client's matters, along with all of their profile information, like, where they went to law school, who they clerk for, what bar admissions do they have, what languages do they speak, what practice areas do they focus. So having all of that information in one single pane of glass, it reduces what we call the toggling tax. That, that information resides in 8 or 10 different systems. So being able to, again, present it as a single pane of glass reduces the toggling tax that all information workers pay. In fact, Harvard Business Review did a study many years ago. It was post-COVID, so 4 years ago-ish, and they found that 9% of information workers' time was spent reorienting themselves as they switch from application to application. So for a 40-hour work week, that's almost 4 hours a week. That's significant. And we all know most lawyers work a lot more than 40 hours. So, almost 10% of that. So if you can reduce that friction, that is billable time that attorneys can deploy serving clients and bringing revenue into the firm. So it's all about reducing friction.
Absolutely. If you can't find it, it's frustrating, and you might not get like as good a end product in terms of analysis if you don't have all the information in front of you. I would imagine that AI and LLMs supercharges it and makes access to that information even better.
It does. Yeah. We have a piece of the application. It's called our integration hub. It's an Azure service, and it is the integration layer that has tentacles into all those back office systems. In addition to powering our front end components, it also enables or lights up all of Microsoft's AI capabilities like Azure OpenAI, Azure AI Search, Copilot, Power Automate, Power Apps. So that integration layer in and of itself, today we kind of bundle it in. At some point, we may skew that out separately, and we think that it is an AI enabler for law firms because the Harvey and Laguras of the world, those are great products, and they're a good kind of first step into a firm's AI journey, but they're not differentiating, right? Anything off the shelf that your competitors can go by definition, that's not differentiating. So how do law firms create a durable competitive advantage? We think that the way they'll do that is with their collective knowledge and wisdom of the firm, the documents that created winning outcomes for their clients, the knowledge that was used in resolving legal matters for their clients. And much of that exists in disparate systems today. And if you can allow AI to tap into that, we like to say that's bringing AI to your data instead of bringing your data to AI. That opens up a whole new realm of possibilities. And I'll be honest, like most firms aren't quite there yet in terms of having the data that's clean in a usable format that's easily consumable. But they're getting there. They're starting the journey. Law firms have historically underinvested in data governance, and many aren't on the maturity curve where they need to be to really capitalize effectively on all of that extremely valuable content, but they're pushing down that path hard, and we think that integration hub will really enable firms to do some really interesting things.
Well, it sounds really exciting as you pointed out, lawyers are finally got their ears open, their eyes wide open, and taking notice of technology and the difference it can make in law firm profitability and productivity and all that. And these are all great things, and it is kind of a teaser for everyone about what we're going to get into a little bit later. But right now, I do want to jump into your origin story and learn more about you and share that with the audience. First thing is that currently you're based in St. Louis, right?
Correct. Yep.
How long have you been there?
8 years.
8 years.
Yeah. So we moved here from Charlotte, which is where AcroWire, the predecessor company, was based. My wife and I came here to open gyms. So we own 5 burn boot camp franchises here in the St. Louis area, and she runs those. I helped her kind of get started. She's a first-time entrepreneur, and she is absolutely killing it. But I kind of helped her with a lot of the back, like site selection, negotiating leases, finding and vetting contractors, all that sort of back office, how to set up the legal entities, all that boring stuff. We've had tremendous success. 4 out of our 5 gyms qualify for what's called Fire Club, which is like the top 20 gyms in the franchise brand, which there's over 400. So 4 out of our 5 qualify for Fire Club this year, and that is 100% due to her amazing ability to just go out there and build community and push people. People get results. You know how we found this? Funny story. So how we got into this, I was working like 60 plus hours a week. I was totally overworked, not managing work-life balance at all. We had 2 young kids. And after my daughter was born in 2014, we noticed all of the moms in the neighborhood like getting skinny, like after they had babies.
Yeah.
I was just like, wow, Mandy lost a lot of weight. Oh, Lindsay really did too. And like eventually I figured out there was a burn boot camp that had opened up. It was the first one, maybe 4 or 5 miles down the street, and they offered free childcare. So the moms could bring their kids in, have their something to do with their kid while they went and worked out. And it is a truly a boot camp style workout. So I saw that and I was like, wow. Then my wife joined and I saw the transformation it made with her. So I decided to go, and it absolutely kicked my butt. I like to lift weights, don't like cardio. They mopped the floor with me. But it hit me. I was like, man, this is unique. I've been around fitness my whole life, and this was really unique in the community that they build. They do fundraisers and high fives. It's very encouraging, and it gets people committed beyond just I want to lose weight. Like, oh, Sally's going to be there. I love Sally. I feel good when I do a good set and people give me high fives. So, yeah, that's why we moved to St. Louis in 2018.
Wow. A few things. Like number one, it touches on like your entrepreneurial spirit and hers, and everything that you've learned over your career probably made it much easier than starting from scratch to kind of execute on that. Second thing is like just the power of community. The power of like beyond the tech within what you're doing now, like beyond the ROI and like the objective measures of things. It really is about people and bringing them together, and you got to feel a part of something mission driven to actually make it worthwhile. In doing my research for interviewing you, I saw that you went to high school in Norfolk, Virginia. So I imagine, is that where you grew up?
It is. Yeah, we moved around a lot, but spent my formative years in, so 5th grade through college in Norfolk, Virginia. My mother was also an entrepreneur. She owned restaurants, and that was really the inspiration for me becoming an entrepreneur. I worked in the restaurants with her. In fact, interesting story, I'm a high school dropout. I never graduated high school. And when I did, my mom put me to work in the restaurants, and not by my choice, but she said, look, if you're not going to school, you're going to work. And she gave me the worst jobs in the place, like mopping the floor, chopping the onions, doing the dishes. And I was begging to go back to school. So I got a GED. I went to Norfolk State University for 2 semesters. That's a HBCU. Then went to community college, had almost straight A's, got into UNC Chapel Hill out of state, got a degree in math, and then eventually an MBA. So I went from high school dropout to having an MBA because of the work ethic that my mother, I didn't want to work like she did.
Yeah.
She worked hard, and it turned me around. I was like, we had a kind of an epiphany moment. I must have been maybe 17 at the time, maybe 16, driving with her to work, and we walk out. We lived in an apartment. We walked out. It was middle of summer. It was probably 85 degrees at 8 in the morning, and we walked by a big pile of trash, and it smelled. I see the trash guys coming up the street, and I was like, man, I'm glad that's not my job. And my mom grabbed me. She goes, "You're not even qualified to do that job." She said, "To work for the city of Norfolk, you have to be a high school graduate. You're not even qualified to pick up that trash." And it was just mind blown. Really, that really shifted my paradigm. And kind of from that moment on, I was like, it really motivated me to get it together and not head down the path that I was headed.
Well, I feel that. But at the same time, it must have been an awful amount of motivation because if you look at, what you've done, it's clear that message was driven home.
Yeah, it resonated. When you're a restaurant owner, there's no days off. Like you have to be in there doing the quality control, interfacing with the customers, making sure the stock is rotated properly and quality and integrity of the food coming out of the restaurant is where it needs to be. And it's really difficult to get help, right? Nobody really likes working in restaurants because it is so hard. So yeah, I saw how hard she worked, and it really lit a fire under me that lasts honestly to this day.
You have to start early in the day as a restaurant owner to get started. My aunt and uncle had run a restaurant in Los Angeles, so I know a few times like they would be up getting, produce and being up at like 5 in the morning, if not earlier, to get things started for the day. So that I could imagine, that made an impression on you too.
Yeah, you remember the "It's time to make the donuts" commercials? Dunkin' Donuts, the guy would wake up out of a dead sleep, like, "Oh, it's time to make the donuts." It's real.
Yeah.
It's real. It's a very difficult line of work, and yeah, I was motivated to not make that my end game.
Well, and I see that, you got your bachelor's in mathematics, and amongst the different things that you studied in achieving that degree was also like database management. And that really struck me because we're contemporaries. We're just a year apart. And this was in 94, I think. And, databases, that's pretty cool.
I always geeked out with computers, so I started when I was in fifth grade. I had a little Texas Instruments 99 4A. If you're old enough to have started in the early days of PCs, you might know what that is, and a Commodore 32 and eventually an Apple. But I was super into that as a kid, and then I got out of it in high school because it wasn't cool to be a computer guy, right? So I had to, trying to be in with the cool kids.
Yeah.
I quit paying attention, started doing skateboards and, all those other things that the cool crowd does. But then when I got into college, I rediscovered it, and I didn't care so much about looking cool when I was in college. So I gravitated back towards it. So yeah, did a lot of study of theory, database theory, EF cod and the normal forms and tuples. And if you're a database person, you know what all that is.
It might be a little insider baseball for everyone, but it's really impressive that at that time, and it links up with something that you started, I think, a year before you graduated, which was your first company that you founded. If you could speak a little bit about that, I think it was a collection company.
Yeah, it was a collection agency. So when we moved to North Carolina, she opened up another restaurant, and we used to do delivery. And this is in Raleigh, North Carolina. We delivered to the state employees during the day. Raleigh's the capital of North Carolina. They have a huge state employee complex, not terribly well-paying jobs. So they're kind of, a lot of state employees are living paycheck to paycheck. They were bouncing checks, paying for food. And then at night, college students, so NC State, St. Mary's, all Shaw University, all the local colleges. That's another contingent of check bouncing people, kids not knowing how to bounce their checks. So she was getting bounce checks left and right. So I was a junior at UNC, and she put me in charge of doing the collections part-time basis. I was making like six, seven, $800 a week collecting these checks, just working for the service fee.
Hmm.
And I was like, man, this seems like this is an opportunity. So I actually quit college for a year, got licensed and bonded by the state of North Carolina, and started a collection agency, and then finished up my degree at night while I ran this business. And that's really when my database career kind of accelerated, because I didn't have money for an ERP to manage all this. It started off in Microsoft Access 1.1. And then eventually we had to scale. We got fairly decently big. We had 1,100 clients in like 23 states. And, I had a team of, I don't know, 30, 40 collectors. So we outgrew Access. So I had to pick up a copy of SQL Server and learn some server side database skills. And I learned so much that by the time the late 90s rolled around, I had acquired so many tech skills. Guys were getting, like high six-figure jobs with these skills. So I decided to throw my name in the hat. At this point, my mom had sold her restaurant and came to work with me in the collection business because it was so much easier. The restaurant business was hard, and we were fairly successful. So I turned the business over to her. I got an offer from Microsoft, and I moved to Charlotte, and I was on the SQL Server team at Microsoft in the late 90s, early 2000s.
What was that like?
That was a super learning experience for me, and I really value it and look back on those days fondly. It's a really tough job. So I was on the front line support. I started off supporting people who were building databases in Microsoft Access, primarily business users. And then eventually they saw my SQL skills and they were like, we have bigger needs over here. So I learned so much from just seeing how other engineers approached problems and solving them, that it really gave me a diverse perspective that I ultimately carried into the consulting business much later.
And that's one thing that's really impressed me about you, Ted, is with everything that you put out there on LinkedIn and your different points of view, is that you have a very practical, hands-on, no nonsense kind of point of view about things, which I think is refreshing, because there's a lot of thought leadership that gets a little theoretical and maybe too many hot takes, and I think that you really bring it down to earth.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I try to be candid, and sometimes being candid doesn't always make you popular. Like, I say some things about certain tech that I see challenges with, and Copilot is a good example. We're Microsoft partners. I used to work at Microsoft. I love Microsoft, but Copilot has a lot of work to do, and it's really rough around the edges. And if I'm being honest, it's one of the, I would say, the lowest ROIs of any AI tool that you can buy in the marketplace. And I think we should be talking about that, and not to bash Microsoft, but to encourage them to get better, or at least lower their price point until the product does get better. I think that it will in time. It is uniquely positioned to succeed, but Gen AI is very new. Microsoft is still figuring it out, and I have no doubt of their long-term success. I just hope it doesn't take 15 years like it took them to figure out the browser, right? Like, Edge is finally a great browser. Their browser sucked for 14 years, from IE through just the last couple of versions of Edge. The company has far too much riding on AI to let that happen. So I don't
Yeah.
think that it will. I think they'll figure it out.
Yeah, honestly, to me too, it's a little surprising that it's not more well, integrated and all that. But I do want to jump ahead to, Acroware, how that started, and then how it transformed to InfoDash. So just
Yeah.
like, I guess, the start of Acrowire.
Yeah. So while I was at Microsoft, I started consulting on the side. I landed a monster client right out of the gate. It was Maersk Sealand. They're the largest shipping
Oh yeah.
company in the world.
Wow.
And I ended up building a very important stevedoring billing system for them. So stevedoring is when a ship pulls into port, they move containers either onto a rail or a truck chassis or into refrigerated racks. I built the system that did all of the billing for all of their North America ports. At the time, there were about almost 24 of them. And this is going back to 2000, 2001. They were a $5 billion division of Maersk back then. Who knows what they are now. So I wrote the billing system for a $5 billion company as a 27-year-old kid, just based on all the expertise that I had accumulated on the Microsoft database stack over the years. So I did that on the side, ended up leaving Microsoft for my day job, went to Bank of America, spent almost 10 years there, continued to consult on the side, primarily with Maersk. And then in 2008, when the financial crisis hit, my job was not impacted at B of A, but I saw people walk out of the building carrying a box that had been there 30 years. And that just rubbed me all the wrong way. And I thought to myself, you know what? This isn't for me. So I jumped out. I asked Maersk if they could keep me busy for a year while I got some other clients. And they said, you know what? We have a mobile project just queued up and we'll give it to you. This is mobile in 2010. iPhones were brand new. So we did this in industrial handhelds called Windows CE, Windows Compact Edition. So we built a Windows CE app that they used on these industrial handheld devices at all their terminals in 2010 through 2012. And meanwhile, I'm doing work at law firms, fell down the legal rabbit hole really early, and the legal work just kept coming. I only had one shipping company, but law firms they talk, right? You do good work at one law firm, they tell their friends, you get phone calls, you get a lot of inbound leads when you do good work in legal, which is awesome, as long as you do good work. If you do bad work, your phone never rings. So it's one of those kind of communities, which again, we pride ourselves on doing good work. So that dynamic has really helped us.
So the work for law firms at that time was database work, or what kind of work?
We started intranets and extranets really early on. Our first legal client, they no longer exist. They were about a 300 employee default services. This default services in 2008, business was good, right? Like there were mortgage foreclosures left and right. This firm grew from 50 people to 400 within like 18 months. And so we helped them scale everything with their practice management solution. We worked with, I don't know if you know Debbie Foster from Affinity Consulting back in I've known Debbie a very long time.
Oh, wow.
Worked with her and us partnered on helping them build their tech capabilities. It was a fairly sophisticated operation. They had a BPO, business process outsourcing in India, and would do a lot of kind of the grunt work in the default services workflow and push that back. So there was a lot of moving parts. But yeah, we started doing intranets and extranets very early on in the journey.
I guess for people that might be watching this and they're like, intranet, I know what the internet is, but what is an intranet?
Yeah, an intranet is an internal facing, it's essentially a comms mechanism. So it helps reduce email, pardon the interruption emails. We have probably our most popular feature is something called Firm Directory, and I alluded to it earlier. We do a lot of user profile enrichment. So for every timekeeper, we pull in all of their experience data that I talked about earlier, bar admissions, clerkships, languages, areas of focus, and we populate that. So big law firms who have thousands of attorneys, it's a great tool for them to go find expertise to help cross-sell within the firm. So that is a very popular feature, but displaying firm news, celebrations like work anniversaries, birthdays, new hires, those sorts of things. There's a ton of visualizations that we surface these days. So firms are really starting to invest in BI. So financial analytics. which is such a welcome sight to see. It's so overdue. But firms are building like data lakes and data warehouses, and they want something other than just a dashboard full of charts and graphs to share with their attorneys. They can go to a client page and see, a revenue over time line graph or a bar chart with WIP and AR or whatever. So intranets have become much more complex organisms, if you will, than the early days when they were primarily static and just had a lot of policies and procedures and whatnot.
So you were definitely a mover and shaker in the cloud way before it was cool and way before it was adopted. I'm curious though, like what led to that transition to InfoDash? Like how is InfoDash different and separate from AcroWire, and tell me about that.
Yeah. So when we were AcroWire, we worked on a time and materials basis, just like a law firm does. If it took us 1,000 hours to build your solution, you paid for 1,000 hours worth of time. But we, having had partnered with Handshake in the mid 2010s and really getting a peek under the hood and seeing where all the bodies were buried and learning, hey, you know what, we could build a cloud first solution. That was really the motivation. So Handshake was born on-prem, and we wanted to be born in the cloud, and it's a very different architecture. So we went cloud only in 2022. So we're a product company now. Intranet, we have almost, well, right at 25% of the AmLaw use us. We're only a little over 3 years old. So about 50 AmLaw firms.
Wow.
We also launched Extranet in May. So we've been working on that for 2.5 years. That's always been the bigger market opportunity for us. But the reason we started with intranets first is because all these big law firms were finally moving to the cloud post-COVID. Like pre-COVID, I don't care what anybody tells you, law firms weren't in the cloud. Big law firms. You may have a little piece of something, infrastructure in the cloud, or maybe you have a SharePoint Online environment that has not much in it. Law firms did not move in earnest, big law firms, until really post-COVID. And then it was like, hey, I have this on-prem intranet. I got to move it to the cloud. What I have won't run. So that's why we went there first. On the extranet side, we're taking on HiQ. They're I guess, a dominant player in that space today. And candidly, not much has changed about HiQ since TR bought them in 2019. The only thing that's changed is the price, which it keeps going up. So there's been a lack of innovation on the extranet side and certainly on the intranet side. So we're coming in and trying to fill that gap. We think that law firms deserve better, and that's what we're trying to deliver on.
That point you made about pre-COVID, that most law firms didn't have any cloud presence, it's a bit shocking, actually. I would think from a survival standpoint, like you would want to have cloud backups and have some presence within the cloud. So that's something I didn't know.
Yeah, and now cloud backups, so that you could have some disaster recovery things. They would have Mimecast in the cloud. In 2020, very few even had messaging in the cloud. So like Exchange Online versus on-prem. In 2020, the vast majority of the AmLaw were running Exchange on-prem, which in my opinion is crazy. Like that's the lowest hanging fruit. Now that has completely switched. So I would say that the vast majority are now running messaging in the cloud. But in 2020, that just wasn't the case. Maybe they had Exchange in hybrid mode. That was a progressive big law firm in 2020, Exchange in hybrid mode. They've gotten the message though, and a lot of this, it's not just the law firm's fault. A lot of law firm clients had OCGs that prevented this.
OCG?
Outside counsel guidelines. So if a law firm does work in a regulated industry like financial services especially, they were especially difficult, had a really high bar in their OCGs around putting their data in the cloud, which is crazy because A, many of them are in the cloud, and B, who is going to do a better job securing the infrastructure? Some law firm IT department or Microsoft? My money's on Microsoft. So it's a bit crazy that existed as long as it did, but those barriers have mostly fallen. I don't know of any AM law firm that now doesn't at least have a timeline to be in the cloud.
It's interesting how some of these cycles just repeat themselves. Like the whole like buy versus build dialogue that happens about AI is the same, as you're just pointing out, that happened with the cloud. And the thing is, if you step back from it for a minute, it makes a lot of sense that buying makes a better, it's a better investment than building, because if you're buying, you're using a third party company like InfoDash that has worked across clients, across years, creating best practices and insights from all of that experience that you are in a position to bring to bear on the next implementation that a client needs, as opposed to them. And the way I kind of pointed it out one time was, it's like you could build your own car. There's nothing to prevent you from doing that. You could do it, but it's going to be hard to make it as reliable as something you can get from Ford.
100%. And you know what's interesting is we have no competition on the internet side other than custom dev. So Handshake they're really not in the picture anymore. So it's us and custom dev. And we don't lose many deals to custom dev, but we've lost a few. And you know what? I would say at least half of them have come back either halfway or sometimes all the way through the project and go, man, this is too much to support. There's enhancements, there's support, there's training, there's documentation. I have to maintain uptime. Like all of these things is it the highest and best use of your IT team's time to manage this when you've got a product company who that's all we do are law firms, right? We don't have one customer who's not a big law firm. So we know the space, we learn things that we learn from one client, we incorporate back into the product and we make it better. So it's crazy that happens, but it does. I would say probably less than 5% of big law firms build their own. So it's going to happen here and there, but that's really our only competition.
Are there a couple of pointers that you can, or practice tips out that you can give out there for the lawyers and law firms that are listening? What are a couple things they're doing wrong that how they should do it right? And maybe if you could communicate 1 or 2 points along those lines.
Yeah. So I guess it would depend for lawyers specifically. I talk a lot about the structural on LinkedIn and in my podcast. I have a podcast of my own called Legal Innovation Spotlight. A lot of the dialogue is around kind of the structure of law firms themselves. So they're partnerships. U.S. tax code requires any entity, I think the threshold is 25 million. If you do 25 million in revenue, you have to be on an accrual accounting basis. Law firms have an exception, so to just professional services in general. So they're cash basis partnerships. And these partnerships prioritize profit taking at the end of the year, which makes capital investment very difficult. Like there's not much set aside at the end of the year for investing in the firm.
Their incentive is to just zero it out at the end of the year.
100%, yeah. Exactly. And law firms are very transient. Like lawyers can pick up and with their book of business and move to the law firm down the street. So what's my incentive to invest in a project that's going to have a 5-year break even if I might leave in 2 and go down to the law firm? Why am I going to sacrifice a portion of my profits? That mindset isn't going to work in this next iteration of law firms. Neither is the business model. I don't think that a cash basis partnership is optimized for doing any semblance of R&D or any long-term investment. So I think firms really need to start thinking outside the box on how to position themselves for this new tech-enabled legal service delivery world. How are they going to do that? Are they going to be able to rally the support to get partners to vote, even the ones with short retirement horizons, to vote on capital expenditures, capital projects that have extended break-even periods? That problem has to get solved, and it's not being talked about much today at all. And it worries me because all of our business is tied up with law firms. I want them to succeed. So I'm really trying to raise awareness and initiate dialogue around this challenge. I have some ideas on approaches. I actually posted on LinkedIn Big Law 2.0. It's like a transformation blueprint where they essentially spin up a C Corp, a separate entity, not a subsidiary, with a traditional governance structure like a board, professional management, stakeholders, and fund a portion of proceeds every year while this business that they're in is still really profitable, right? We still have a couple years left of making good money on selling time. That is going to slowly lose ground. So while times are good, start investing in the future and start building out the infrastructure necessary to make this transition, which I think it's going to be a pretty dramatic transition in terms of magnitude, timeline. It's up for grabs on how long this is going to take. I don't see it taking longer than 5 years. I think in 5 years, the legal market is going to look completely different, possibly as soon as 3, but definitely not longer than 5 by my estimations anyway.
I totally agree with you on that. I think we're on the same page, and it's exactly that kind of, concrete, practical insight that I think is your signature. Couple things I want to ask you that I ask all my guests. The first one is obviously, far-ranging the things that you work on, everything from your main business of InfoDash to helping your wife with her entrepreneurial adventure. So there's a lot going on. How, do you have any tips for the audience about how to manage all that? Can you have a work-life balance with all that going on?
It is so tough, and it is a constant struggle. And anybody who is as busy as I am or you are, an entrepreneur who tells you that it's not a struggle is either amazing human being and exceptional or lying. It is a struggle. So there's a couple practices that I implement, and one of them is I think for 30 minutes a day. Think, no phone, no kids. I get up at 6, I get a cup of coffee, I go sit out while the weather's nice. I sit out on my deck. I've got a heater, a little fire table, and I sit there with my cup of coffee and nobody bothers me, and I allocate 30 minutes a day during the week to thinking. And since I started that, I've been doing it for, I don't know, a couple of months now. The number of insights I've had, because I'm busy, I have no idle time. If I'm in the car, I'm listening to podcasts like yours. If I'm at the gym, I'm listening to music. If I'm shuttling kids around, we got banter. There's never any downtime. So when do you really allocate time to really just sit and think? And when I think, I don't have an agenda. I let the thoughts flow. It's almost like a meditation. And whatever pops up, I explore. And it has been extremely productive for me. I'm a big advocate of setting some time aside for thinking. Sounds simple, doesn't it? I mean, it's so simple, but we don't do it.
You're right. You're right. It's fantastic advice. We're plugged in far too often throughout the day. The related question I have is, after all that thinking, after all the stuff that you do, what makes it worthwhile for you at the end of the day?
Yeah, that is a really good question. So I did spend 10 years, I've been an entrepreneur for 32, but for 10 of those, I had a day job and was consulting on the side. And when I was a cog in the corporate wheel, I didn't thrive. I actually worked my way up the ladder quite a bit, but I wasn't happy. So what really drives me now is making, and this is going to sound like I'm patting myself on the back or plugging, but it's absolutely true. Like delivering good work for customers and seeing how much they appreciate it. In legal tech, if you've been around for a while in legal tech, that is not the norm. Like the big companies out there that, gobble up all these other smaller innovative companies, a lot of times that's where innovation goes to die, right? And I want to do it differently. and deliver successful outcomes and feel good about the work that I do, and go to conferences and like not have to act like I'm on my phone because I don't want to make eye contact because I really did a customer wrong over there. I want to go and shake people's hands and look them in the eye and deliver good work, and then have my people feel like they're making a difference too. And man, sometimes you don't get that in the corporate world. You do with small companies. And I think it's just such a valuable thing to have that sense of we're doing good work here.
Absolutely. Those are words of wisdom, something to focus on that drives you day to day. I know it does for me too. So I truly appreciate that. And I appreciate you being on the show, Ted. It's been great having you on.
Yeah, thank you. It's been an honor. I've seen all the good work that you're doing in the space around thought leadership, putting together virtual conferences, and that's so cool. If I had more time, I would do it too. I keep pretty busy just having a weekly podcast and doing things like this. So maybe one of these days we'll have to partner up and figure out something to do something together.
Well, that sounds like a blast. I look forward to that.
Awesome.
So for everyone who's watching, who's learned more about you and InfoDash, how could they learn more? Keep in touch.
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I post there quite a bit. A lot of thought leadership on legal tech, the business of law, AI. So you can find me on LinkedIn. It's LinkedIn/Ted Theo or Ted Theodoropoulos. Pretty easy. It sounds intimidating. It's Theodore and then Opolis. Take off the E and add an Opolis and you'll find me. And then as far as InfoDash, get infodash.com. And if you're a listener of podcasts, which they must be if they're listening to yours, the Legal Innovation Spotlight is a podcast we release every Wednesday, and we talk about issues related to innovation in the legal industry.
Cool. Well, thanks again for being on. Everyone out there, check out Ted's podcast. It's well worth it. And just want to thank all of you for watching. Appreciate it. And I'll see you next time.
Everyone. Take care.
Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.